It's such a powerful tool for solving cases where we had nothing in the past. That's primarily what I'm trying to focus on. I haven't found one yet where I go back and I go, man, those detectives were slacking. The detectives of the past were phenomenal, especially when you think about what they were doing with a phone book and loafers.
Welcome back, viewers, watchers, listeners. I'm your host, Tyler Owen.
And Clint McNear.
How was the travel down?
It was smooth. We went via Houston. We went to Harris County to the TTPOA SWAT competition.
Man,
and then over here.
That competition is amazing.
Yeah, there's some studs out there plowing through those obstacle courses, man.
Yeah. It was. I went over there last Wednesday or Thursday, and kudos to not just kudos to the teams, but kudos to TTPOA. Every time that I thought, think about it, right? We've all been in an agency where qualifications are going on or SWAT's going on, and there's like the breathtaking moment. You're like, oh shit, this dude's shooting down range, and man, those guys were on top of it. I think there was 50 teams. I think some maybe more, maybe less, but for 50 tactical teams to get on a range that Harris County hosted and not have any incidents. Now, and I'm not talking about just shooting, but there was no safety incidents while I was there. Man, kudos to those guys because they run a tight ship and a really professional bunch of guys. So
I left Forney at about 6, rolled in about 9:30. They were on the O course, and I looked out there and I was like, dude, I may get out and just freaking go run through the O course. And then I got out of my truck and walked to the back, and I was out of breath, and I was like,
"Yeah, I'm good.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I don't leave that to
They asked me if I wanted to rappel with my camera. I've got this chest thing, this camera, and I passed on it. I didn't want to show anybody up. I didn't want to have all these, tactical. Number one, I didn't have hair gel.
Right.
And I didn't want to show them up, man.
Rappel out of my truck?
No,
I can rappel out of my truck.
Were you there at the helicopter park? Yeah. So that place is a maze. The Harris County Sheriff's Office training facility is phenomenal. So.
I had to call in. I got lost and had to call in, and
I should have dropped you the pin. I dropped Leighton the pin, knowing that Leighton is Leighton and was not going to be able to find it, and called one of us griping because he can't find it. So. Anyway, man, we got a special guest on today. Cool thing is a good friend of mine from East Texas that's been on the podcast, John Vance, retired Ranger. John Vance reached out and said, "Hey, I've got a guest idea that I think would be phenomenal." So he passed on your information, and man, here we are, John Galloway with Fort Worth PD.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. How was the stay last night at the illustrious DoubleTree Hotel?
It was fantastic and unexpected, so thank y'all for that. I appreciate it. It saved me from driving, close to 4 hours to get here this morning.
Well, before I forget, if you guys have any podcast guests, ideas, feel free to reach out to us at bluegrit@tmpa.org. Me or Clint monitor that, as well as John Sarigan, so we'll get that hooked up. And I don't want to say secretary because she's more than a secretary. She's the camera operator. She's the HMFIC that runs this side of things. Shelly can hook you up with getting the hotel reservations and help us out, and would however she can. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Before we dive into, I know some of you, because I watch you haven't clicked like or subscribe. So if you would, where are you going to put it at? Right here?
Right here, yeah.
Right here?
Yeah, right here.
Please like, share, subscribe, hit whatever you do. I don't know what all you do. Do whatever it is that you do.
To subscribe
and hit notifications so you get notified when they come out.
100%. We like doing these podcasts. The realization is this is your voice. We just have the honor of getting behind the microphone and being that voice. So hit that subscribe button. But man, John, we dive off in each episode of where you grew up, how you got in law enforcement, who the hell's John, and we'll kick it off from there.
Well, like I said, when I met you, I hear John and I kind of look around.
J-Dub.
J-Dub is what I go by. JW. Yeah. So, I grew up in very, very young in Corpus. I have a little sister. She was born there, but most of my memories are around Dickinson area.
Okay.
So I was in Dickinson for all of school up until high school. And then my dad got a job in the DFW area, and we moved to Grapevine.
Good town.
It is, but it's considerably different than when I was there. I tell the story about where I raised my horses. 360 goes right over that. Now, matter of fact, when I was going in the military, the old man that I was leasing from to keep the pasture area, he said, you know, everybody's got to go. Eminent domain is taking my land from me.
Yep.
And sure enough, now it's
Have
360.
you ever heard of the Catfish Hut? on Lake Grapevine?
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine, a real close friend of mine, I call him Aunt Mitch, and we'll dive off into that later on. His family owns
Aunt
it.
Mitch?
The Hall, yeah.
Okay,
the
yeah.
Hall family own that.
I knew Decall. I went to
There
school
you
with
go.
Decall.
And so they have now created the Catfish Hut food truck.
Okay.
And so we were kind of helping him kind of promote that a little bit. But what a if you've never eaten Catfish Hut catfish, it is phenomenal.
It is.
It's great.
Really good
anyways,
stuff.
it's based here in Grapevine.
Yeah. And I drive around that town now, and hardly all my landmarks are gone.
Yeah.
I hardly know my way around anymore,
growing.
but it's growing like crazy. So,
Graduated from Grapevine High School?
in 1989, because of my financial status at the time, I couldn't go to college, so I went in the military. Went in the United States Air Force. Did 4 years there. Wanted to see the world, and like a lot of folks, I did. I went to Abilene, Texas, and I stayed there for 4 years, man.
Yeah.
4 years. And President Clinton got elected, and it appeared as though there weren't going to be any moves soon. So I was going to be in Abilene for a while, and I decided to get out.
Yeah.
It's typical military. You said, I'd like to go see a foreign country, and they sent you to the country.
Yes, to the country. That's right. And I know y'all. Well, at least Clint's a veteran.
Yep.
Were you in?
No, sir.
Yeah. When you first go in, they give you what we called a dream sheet.
Mm-hmm.
You get to put and I mean,
Abilene wasn't on that, I guess.
No, it wasn't on there. Japan, Germany,
Things that
South
just
Korea,
sound phenomenal.
yeah, Abilene, Texas.
Foreign places or Abilene.
Right. And it was foreign to me, man. But I did learn to love it, though. I learned to love that.
Abilene's a cool town.
It's man.
It's not Japan by any means, but it thank God it's Texas to an extent. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be in Abilene for 4 years with the military.
It grows on you, though, and I got to do a lot of hunting and fishing, and that's something that I enjoy. So,
And there's something about West Texas people.
oh man,
They're good.
pure gold,
Good
pure
people.
gold.
Yep.
And it took me, it's funny you mentioned that, because it took me a while to, I don't know if trust is the right word, but just to realize how good they are and welcome that and learn to appreciate them like I should. So yeah, but once I did, man, everybody out there feels like family. So
Yeah.
So
What was your MOS in the Air Force?
security police.
So you went to Lackland?
Went to Lackland Air Force Base, 96 Police Squadron. I started off on the security side, went into the control center there, and did a little bit of dabbling with cross, doing the law enforcement side also. But that was towards the end, and I got out after 4 years.
What made you go security forces? Is there any law enforcement history in your family? Anybody prior?
No, my only exposure to law enforcement as a kid was my uncle, who did it's either 36, 38 years at Houston PD.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a long time.
Long time. And at that time, their drop program, I don't think there was a limit to it. So he retired at their normal retirement years, and then did a long time in their drop, And then I have a cousin who I'm very, very close with, more like a brother than a cousin. We actually lived together for a while, and as kids, and he became a Houston officer.
Oh, cool.
So those are the two guys that I had that were that I was exposed to that were law enforcement, but nobody in my immediate family.
Yeah.
So when I went and saw the recruiter, that was what was available. That's why I went in. Yeah, it wasn't a burning desire to do it. It was because that's what they had for me, and I signed and went in. Both of my grandfathers were World War II veterans, so that's what kind of inspired me to the military in general. But
was that security forces time in LE there towards the end of your hitch? Is that what kind of steered you towards law enforcement, or not really at that point yet?
Eventually, because when I got my discharge, I went out and I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, even though I was 23.
I'm 52 and don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up.
I'm 53, and I know the feeling. But at that time, I had a good friend that was right out of high school, had gone into the trades, and he was plumbing houses. And he recruited me to come help, and I did that for a long time. We were plumbing houses, of course. At that time, construction in that area, South Lake, Grapevine. It was just booming.
What year was this? Like early 90s?
92, 93,
Yeah.
or it was 93 that I really got involved in the plumbing. And I did that for a few years and then realized, I don't want to own my own plumbing company. And that's the natural development of it, So what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And one of the things that I forgot to mention is all through high school and the military and all, I was rodeoing quite a bit. So at that time, I'm plumbing houses and rodeoing, and I just knew I was going to be a full-time professional rodeo guy.
What was your gig in?
I rode bulls until I was about 24, and then I looked around and I said, I got to win to get paid.
Yeah.
But if I start fighting bulls, when I show up, I get a little check, So I started. There was a guy named Eddie Rowden in DeSoto, Texas, that was running a little small bull riding at the time, and he would let us come out there and just basically practice bullfighting. So that's what I started doing, and really enjoyed it, and started chasing that dream until I got injured pretty bad, and I said, I need to. I was married to my first wife at the time, and it was you need to decide what you're going to do when you grow up. From her, an ultimatum. I said, you're right. So that's when I went back to my military background. I said, I really enjoyed that time, the camaraderie that I developed from the officers there in the Air Force. And anyway, so there were several agencies when I finally decided to do it that were testing around the Metroplex, one of which was Fort Worth. And
got that vibe of the culture you just came from. Fort Worth's always maintained that welcoming of rodeo lifestyle down at the stockyards, and it's just always had that Western.
Yeah, just the department has a Western heritage.
Yes,
they've maintained, and I really appreciate that about them, and it matches my style. And at the time, they had one of the best retirement packages. Yeah, and it was a large enough department that I felt like I could try a whole bunch of different things at the rank of officer, which suited my style because as we'll probably get into, I jump around quite a bit, or I did at that time. But I tested. I was able. They accepted me, and went to the academy in 2001. And I've been there now since then. I haven't gone to any other departments.
What I like about Fort Worth, and I don't know how to describe it, Fort Worth's a large department, but it's like a large, small department. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows everybody for a big department, and you go to some of the larger agencies, and you're just a number, and you don't really know anybody. And every time I'm around Fort Worth guys, it's like a family, even though it is a large department. And I've always really liked that.
I talked to the same cousin I mentioned earlier there in Houston. He said, man, there's guys from my police academy that once we graduate, I never saw them again. It's so big, they don't run across each other. But especially when I was in patrol, at the jail, we're always seeing each other, and you're right, it is a family. And, I've seen that several times in my career where, say, for example, an officer gets hurt or we've lost an officer, just the way my department takes care of people is pretty amazing. Yep. I have no. You're not going to hear anything from me that's negative about the Fort Worth Police and the family that's there. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you went to Fort Worth PD, you went to their academy.
Yeah.
Obviously went through an FTO process and then hit patrol. Where did you kind of navigate around to kind of what you're doing now? If you want to walk us down that pathway.
You bet. My first couple of years on the department was in patrol, and I was at that time. The biggest need was on the east side of town, which pretty impoverished area, and it was a culture shock to me. I'll admit that. I graduated from Grapevine High School, and I went out there, and it's mostly African-American community, and I had to learn that culture and how to police it.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed over the years that's changed quite a bit that was not the case when I went through is that when I went through, there were several veteran officers on my shift that were there, and they were incredible at just taking you under the wing, helping you, trying to make better officers. That's what they wanted. Whereas now, there's several theories as to why this has happened, but it's it feels like younger officers training young officers.
Well, and I want to hit on that. We started about the same time. I started in 05, but I was working in Dallas County in 03. The culture difference that I see now, smartphones have changed not only society, but it's changed our profession significantly, because when we first started, we would go to briefing, and then we would go typically either shad calls, run traffic, be proactive. If we're not doing one of those three things,
Yeah.
we're what we call 25 and we're window to window. And the life lessons, the amount of frustration, things that are going on in your personal life, professional life. Man, there was so much shit hashed out between those two window seals because we weren't so focused on our phones. Now it seems like, and I've been out of law enforcement just a little over 2 years now. It seems like because of the persecution of cops, because of this whole perception of the anti-police rhetoric, cops just want to be let the fuck alone and go to a parking lot with their windows rolled up that are tinted and just be there until a call comes. And they don't have that camaraderie. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen all the time, but I'm saying I don't see it as often as I do of the window-to-window talks,
I absolutely agree with you. And not only the camaraderie that you're talking about, but the relationship with the community.
Yep.
We would get out and walk.
Yeah.
We'd get out and walk and meet people. And on more than one occasion, I've walked up on an officer in a parking lot and tapped on the window. Said, "Hey, man, get off your phone. I walked up on you and you didn't even know I was coming." So there's a lot of things about like you're saying, that cell phone that I think need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So, but so anyway, that was my first 2 years of patrol. And then, and you'll hear me say this quite a bit, is I've been blessed to be around some really great people. I work hard. I try to work hard. But, man, some of the things that I've done are just because other people open those doors for me and help guide me. So that being said, I was able to go to what we call the zero tolerance team. And I'll be honest with you, I forgot what the little name they gave us at the time, because it's changed multiple times over the years. But y'all know,
Jump Out Boys.
The Jump Out Boys, the zero tolerance. And,
Yeah.
man, that team, they all had quite a bit more experience than I did when I joined the team, but it was so much fun. Now, the mission has kind of changed at this point. It's a little more, I guess, tactically driven than it was when I was there. We did plainclothes operations. We did train with SWAT, mostly doing
Arrest warrants and stuff.
And narcotics warrants and things like that. But we did a lot of plainclothes. So it was a really great environment for me to grow and learn about some policing from some really, really high speed, good officers. While I was there, I was invited to come and teach at our firearms center. And I would do it in an on-loan capacity. I'd go down when they had certain schools or when the recruits were coming through, that kind of thing, when they needed more people, because we didn't have a full-time academy staff.
Right.
Firearms staff, except for the actual firearms master. So I would do that, and then when they finally decided to do a full-time staff for the firearms center, I went down there and I was a firearms instructor for a while. During all this, I met who's currently my wife, and when we decided to get married, I knew that I wanted to do something that made a little more money, a little more opportunity for overtime and that kind of thing. So, and this might interest you. I went over to motors.
Yeah.
You were a motor jock, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I went to motors because everybody said, "Hey, man, traffic, they get a lot of overtime. They work." So I was like, let's do it. The problem was I hated writing tickets. And so I think
a tough spot to be in when you're on motors.
Yeah.
I think they still call it today, when you get called on the carpet for not doing enough tickets, the J-Dub talk. Because I was always in there. I was like, yes, Sarge, I'm sorry. I'll work on that. I was a giving warnings guy, but I loved riding that bike.
It was so fun.
It was so much fun, man. Yeah. And
I look back on, there was days that I hated life just with the heat. I mean, I think when it's 116 outside, we've had guys that have passed out. I'm sure y'all have too, in the heat. I'm gonna say, I know people have advocated to for like the outer carriers, in different uniforms to be a lot more cooler.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, I refused. It was the whole uniform presence of a motor jock with the knee high boots.
You bet.
Pressed uniform. I could set mine up and it would stand tall on its own with stay flow. But yeah, anyway,
I was the same
loved it.
way. I like the traditional uniform,
Yeah.
and because of a promise that I made my family, I always wore my vest too. And man, you're right, that heat will get you.
Oh,
A story about that. I was sitting on 35 one time, and I was running LiDAR, and my LiDAR gun started blinking this code. I was like, well, what's going on with that? So I took it down to the center that handled our equipment and showed him the code. He goes, yeah, your equipment got too hot.
yeah.
What about me?
That's exactly. I was like, yeah, well, that's great. So I went and sat in the 7-Eleven freezer. That's what we would do. We'd go to 7-Eleven and get behind the beer cooler. And
Did y'all have a break-in period? I've always wanted to ask that, like a big agency like that with Fort Worth. We had a break-in period. The first 500 miles, we were off the entire week, and we were told to go ride. And I'm like, okay, specify ride. And they told us to ride all of East Texas, go to Shreveport, ride back. And you had to put 500 because it was the break-in period for the Harley-Davidson motorcycles. If there was a problem, it would be within the 500 period. And then after that, we would put our lots and stuff on. So it was kind of like it wasn't vacation because we were with colleagues, but we would dive off in little dive bars and everything.
He's Googling.
We would do everything they told us not to do. Right?
He's Googling, how far is it to Colorado?
Yeah. I wasn't sure if y'all did that or not.
well, no. But did you have your own bike?
No, it was
No.
departments. It was the
Okay.
department bike.
So prior to me going to Motors, a lot of our guys, they would go buy their bike, and then the city, I guess, gave them an allowance. And
crazy.
yeah. So, but when I went on,
Wow.
the city
Yeah.
had started buying bikes. They were gonna own them.
Harleys? Did you ride a Harley?
We rode Harleys. Yeah.
Nice.
Road Kings or Road Glides?
Road King. My first bike was Road King, and then we went to Street Glides.
Yeah, I like the Road King.
Road
Yep.
Glide? Which one's the one with the
Electric Glide?
Electric Glide? Thank
Yeah.
you. Yep.
Nice.
I loved riding, but I'm not I don't have. It's kind of like the firearms. I love shooting. I can teach shooting, but I'm not the guy that can tell you every spring that's in a SIG and that kind of thing. But anyway, and I tell that when I go down to our academy and talk to recruits, I said that was the most fun that I had in a uniform was being a motor jock and the camaraderie.
So how long in deployment? How long were you in deployment unit or jump out or?
Let's see, my goodness. If you want to talk about total time, it was about 3 years, 3.5 years. Now, like I said, some of that was at the range, but on paper I was assigned to them. But 2 years full time and then back and forth.
And then how long on motors?
I went in 08 and then I promoted to detective in 2012. So
Nice.
yeah, so about a little over 4 years in motors.
When you get promoted to CID, what unit did you go in?
My first assignment was our family violence unit.
Okay. It's a good start for. Sometimes I'll hear detectives make CID and they go straight into homicide or child crimes, and I'm like, man, you need to cut your teeth.
Oh man, yeah.
If your department is set up, you need to cut your teeth on family violence or property crimes or auto theft, or I think there's a good core to build for investigations before jumping into something. Without
a doubt. And you had talked about this on one of your previous episodes, how, Friday you're working as an officer, and then the next day you're being sent out to a scene, supposed to know how to run it, So yeah, you're right. Definitely. There needs to be a break-in period and an opportunity to learn. And there you go. Once again, I was pretty blessed to have that progression, because I started off in family violence, which was a good unit. We'd walk in and have 25 cases on our desk, so it was good. It was a good opportunity to learn, triage of cases and just how to do case management. And at that time, we still had like a downtown headquarters, and all of the detectives that were in that building were on the 3rd floor. So I'm assigned to family violence, but just a few cubicles down is robbery, a few cubicles down sexual assault, and then down at the end was homicide. So I was exposed to what they were doing, got to talk to some very, very good detectives, and it inspired me to keep going in that direction. Because my initial intent when I promoted is to do the minimum time in the detective's office, get back out to motors. I want to be a motor sergeant. So that I did my goodness, it was not even a year in family violence, and then I went over to our sexual assault unit. Still with the intent of being a motor sergeant, but intrigued by the job. That was a good opportunity for me to learn interview interrogation.
Was that adult and kid sexual assaults, or one or the other only?
It's adult only. We have what we call CACU, Crimes Against Children unit, that handle anything below, I believe their cutoff ages
15,
yeah. Maybe 13, something similar.
Yeah.
And so it was adult only. Interview interrogation and DNA. That I really got a good. I cut my teeth on DNA reports and trying to learn how to analyze those. A sergeant's test was coming up. I was interested in promoting, and I thought I need to slow down because that's a heavy call-out unit. The sexual assault unit is heavy call-out. And I went to our traffic investigative unit to do that. I thought, in my ignorance, they don't get called out as much. It'd be a chance to slow down and just kind of study for the sergeant's test in my off time. Turns out, traffic investigative unit was pretty busy. We did all fatality accidents and any accidents involving officers, and then we handled the DWIs, and the hit and runs would come to us for finishing off and filing. And anyway, I during that time frame, I said, you know what? Never mind. I like investigations. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to make a career out of investigations, be the best that I can.
Yeah.
And I felt like, this may be arguable, but I felt like the pinnacle of that would be homicide. So that's what I shot for. And an opportunity came up to go to robbery. So that got me back over to the building where everybody was, and it also got me exposed to violent crime investigations. So I went over there. That expanded my experience and knowledge in interview interrogation, and kind of exposed me to like digital forensics. We did a lot of cell phone stuff. And then, of course, just the violent crime in general. And I stayed there for a couple of years until a homicide vacancy came open, and I put in for it. And I've been in homicide since 2016.
Oh, nice.
Damn.
Do y'all work your police shootings, or does another unit work police shootings?
Have you ever heard the song, "I've Been Everywhere, Man"?
Yeah.
There's a detective in my unit that sings that, when he talks about my career, because we have a unit called Major Case that does officer-involved shootings and anything involving, use of force incidents with officers. And I'll talk about that a little bit, but I did about 10 months over there also.
Okay.
Yeah, during this homicide deal. So when I was 41 years old, I decided, this is with 4 kids at home. When I married my wife, she had 2, and then we've had 2 together. I said, I'm going to go to college. So
Nothing else going on.
Nothing else going on, man. I'm in a heavy call-out unit at work, and I think I need to get educated. So Tarleton had a relationship with Forward Police, and it's called the BAAS program, and it helps you get your undergraduate degree with some credit being applied for already gone through a police academy, things like that. So I did that in criminal justice, and built some relationships with some of the professors, and they encouraged me to get my master's. So I said, you know what, you bet. So I stayed through and got my master's.
Wow.
And then Tarleton started their PhD program.
Oh, wow.
And the same thing. Some professors reached out and said that they thought that I would be a good candidate. And, of course, they're trying to build a program so they would take anybody. So I said, you know what, sounds fun. So that's where I am now. I'm in my last semester of coursework with the PhD program, and then I can start my dissertation. So
wow,
I hope to finish that soon.
Is that where you and Vance met? Or was it on a case?
Vance and I met through church.
Okay.
Yeah, we both go to church in Decatur, and we met and just almost instantly became friends. We have very similar backgrounds. He's a horseshoer. I went to horseshoeing school in the military and did that for a few years. And just following that Western lifestyle. It's kind of my thing. But Anyway, so that's where I am. And so to go back to the major case thing, there came a point where, and this was kind of during COVID, when our caseload doubled in homicide. Our homicide rate just skyrocketed.
Wow.
And when I went over in 2016, we were averaging between 65 and 75 murders a year. During COVID, you're talking 120, 130 murders. And they have since expanded the unit, but at the time we had 8 detectives, and it was a lot. It was a lot. So I went to major case to slow down a little bit and focus on my PhD studies. And while I was there, the cold case detective that Fort Worth had promoted and went to be a sergeant. So I put in for the cold case spot to get back over to homicide, which they allowed me to do so, and that's where I am. So I'm still with the homicide unit, but I focus on cold case investigations. Nice. Yeah.
How long have you been in that role?
It's going on about a year now. About a year. Yeah.
So you've been in 23 years, roughly, in law enforcement?
August of this year was 23, so a little over.
It's amazing in a short amount of time. When I got hired, got involved in police work early 90s, it was all like fingerprints.
Yeah.
And, we were interested about what hair, maybe you could do with hair and fingerprints. Mm-hmm. And DNA was like this. It might as well have been like watching the Jetsons. I mean, it was just an unknown that, kind of sounded sci-fi. And it's amazing. Then DNA came online and CODIS hits. And then now with forensic genetic genealogy, you don't even have to find the bad guy anymore. You can find a sibling or a parent or a relative. And in such a short amount of time, the ability, the technology, it's crazy to watch.
It's
and I miss, people ask me if I miss law enforcement. I miss acts. I enjoyed the old school, like whodunit homicide, having to solve something where you have nothing. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. But now, too, seeing the abilities with forensic genetic genealogy and some of the tools that are out there, man, there's so much opportunity now to give families closure that maybe there wasn't before because of all these tools that just haven't been around all that long.
Well, yeah, and the FGG that you're talking about, I'm having to learn that because where I started to get comfortable with STR profiling, the traditional DNA processing, and understand it to a cop's ability. Right. FGG is a whole different animal. Yep. The whole it's SNPs instead of STR, and everything about it is different. And I'm trying my best to learn it and catch up because, like you said, it's such a powerful tool for solving cases where we had nothing in the past. And when we have over 1,000 cold cases in Fort Worth.
Wow.
And yeah, over 1,000.
Wow.
And that's primarily what I'm trying to focus on is how can I apply that technology to these old cases, because I am not going to go back, or I haven't found one yet where I go back and I go, man, those detectives were slacking. Mm-hmm. They just didn't know what they were doing. The detectives of the past were phenomenal, especially when you think about what they were doing with a phone book and loafers. Yep. They hit the street, and the information that they would provide is incredible. But they were limited on technology, so that's where I go back and I try to apply it.
And it is an art. I mean, I'm affiliated with a group called Advanced DNA doing forensic genetic genealogy, and I'm on the peripheral of it. But some of the ladies in there that are doing the actual research and finding these suspects, they'll sit down. Well, they'll get a flag hit and at night and start working, and then they'll text or call the next morning. They set up all night building a tree out, and they've got this tree built out, and they start, hey, I think we just found the guy. And I'm like, well, have you been asleep? No, I got excited about this and built the tree out, and it's either it's one of these two siblings, and they have this huge tree built out, and man, it is awesome. It is, the technology to give people closure now is exciting.
The old cop movies where they'd have the big board and the strings going from this to that and that suspect to this, and those folks can do that, like you said, in a night with a computer, and it's pretty neat to watch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of the cases that you've seen and reviewed, what for the listeners that are are fans of the podcast show, what advice would you give them when they're completing these reports, the initial reports, are showing up? Are you seeing any type of mistakes that law enforcement necessarily were trained back then on, but that we've evolved and gotten better? Especially when it comes to like a cold case like that. I mean, whether, look, I'll call it what it is, right? We all had that one guy that was a smoker and would throw his cigarette butt down right in the middle of a crime scene back when we started. And we're like, God, but we don't have that anymore, right? We've evolved,
right.
And I think every department across the state of Texas, from 2-man to 20 or 2000, we've gotten better at preserving that evidence. And have you seen something like that with a case at Fort Worth where it's like, man, I wish this policy would have been instituted back then, because it may have gave us more leads or evidence.
Okay, so there's two sides to that question. One, sometimes I'm very impressed with the stuff that they did preserve when it comes to evidence. They didn't know DNA,
right?
So why keep this particular handkerchief or whatever that may have had blood on it? They've already printed it. They've already done what they could with it. But so on one side, I'm often amazed at what was preserved. But we have a crime scene unit that's highly trained and just focuses on evidence preservation. So when it comes to that kind of thing, I think we're pretty golden now. And when there's a homicide specifically, the police officers that initially respond, they'll take as much information as they can. When the detective comes, they hand it to him, and so they do the reports. So with regards to homicide reports, they're usually, I don't know that I could take a spin on making them better. But police reports in general, I would say that one of the things that a lot of young officers need to work on is making sure that they don't take what they're thinking in their mind for granted, that the jury's going to understand that. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that they notice at a scene, or some information that they may get from someone that they think, well, I'll just pass it on, but it needs to be in the report. Mm-hmm. And so make sure you focus your police reports
for a long-term goal.
For a long-term goal, and for people who don't know police work.
Yep. And I think it takes leadership, not only at the patrol level, but not. And I'm not saying Fort Worth Police Chief hasn't done a good job at this, but I think all of us, you talking about it right now on podcast, and Clint, his experience with Garland PD, and my experience of kind of teaching these young guys. Look, this is because you just said that because you learned from it, right? I mean, you were in court and you got your ass burned and embarrassed, and so we have this culture now where it's like, oh, I don't want to admit that. You know, that's how we learn. This man is my supervisor, and I promise you, there are certain things that I've done on a daily basis that I've learned from, but he's called me on it to make me a better person and a better employee. Same thing goes for these cops on the streets, and ultimately, it makes us a safer community.
I think that goes back to why people don't car to car as much anymore either, because, and I'm going to sound like the old dude, but there's a lot to be learned. I have a department in North Texas where, if you sneeze, they give you a write up, or you get a PIP, and then they can't figure out why they have issues, and it butts up to Forney, Littletown, Sunnyvale, and the whole culture is broken. Mm-hmm. And if I can't sit down and talk with you and tell you, hey, man, we need to work on this or whatever, without you going to complain to a sergeant or a lieutenant or filing an IA, or somebody's feelings were hurt. The agency I grew up in, senior guys ran the department.
Right.
And if you had to call a supervisor every day, you're freaking incompetent. And literally, I was on deep nights, and like a young guy to have a sexual assault or something, it never crossed my mind to call a supervisor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would, figure out, okay, well, Jimmy George is here. He's got 30-something years on. I'd go to a call box and call him or have him swing by. Mm-hmm. Dude, I have never worked a child sexual assault. Well, you need to do this. And those car-to-car calls, I think people now are afraid to pull up car-to-car because I may offend him, or I may. Yep. Well, that's where you learn. It's all institutional knowledge, I would say. And you talked about, I'm not brilliant, but I've been around a lot of brilliant people. Mm-hmm. What's it exposure, and it's handed down. And you went to assaults, which was down the hall from robbery and homicide. Well, that's where that knowledge is trickling down and past, that institutional knowledge. And now if we're all in our own little cubby and, I don't want to talk to anybody, or that's the culture that I worry about. And with these little departments like Sunnyvale that are broke, well, it's broke from the top down. You know, and if you're dropping paper every time somebody sneezes, there's nobody's gonna work together or trust each other.
Yeah, and for a multitude of reasons, the units that were on that floor are now separated. Homicide's got their own section, robberies in their own, you know. So again, that communication's lost. That passing on of
suspects,
experience, suspects.
My God.
You know, I mean, how many ag robbery suspects end up being our clients?
They do?
Yeah, you would think, but it's weird.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Wholeheartedly, I agree with you. And something that's also been an area of interest for me as far as research is concerned, y'all remember not wearing cameras, body-worn cameras.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever thought this, but I have. There's officers getting in a lot of heat, a lot of trouble for things that we did that were learning experiences. You know, and we learned from them and we moved on, you know, but, and case in point, you know, there's cameras in the car, cameras on your body, you're always being monitored. And I've always known and spoke my voice about officers need to vent, you know, they need to vent. And sometimes that's two cops in a car or side by side, just talking about a call they just went on or whatever experience they had for the day. And some good friends of mine, is verified through them anyway, have had, you know, talks with their commanders, even some write-ups for things that they've said in a car that were out of the public's view.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, these guys got to vent. You don't go home and talk to your family a lot of times about what you've seen or dealt with during the day. So talking to each other is a leaning post that can help them emotionally and relieve some stress. And I think some of that's lost, and I'm concerned about where that could lead us mental health wise for officers.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I agree with you.
And it kind of goes back to the same thing again. Not everything requires paper to be dropped, or there's a whole lot to be learned. Again, my department was kind of old school leadership. They'd call you in and tell you, "You freaking idiot."
Yeah. I've heard that a few times.
Look what you did, and some of the discussions they had with me, I'd probably have preferred a day off or a written reprimand.
Right.
But I assure you, I never did it again.
You bet.
And they didn't paper up my file with a bunch of BS, and I learned from it every time they told me what a moron I was. Or nowadays, everything requires something. There's no more, hey, you know, quit driving too fast to a freaking priority 20 call for no reason. And I think it's changed the entire culture.
I agree.
So you also just kind of shifting gears. You've got an interest in doing some podcasting with your, I'll call it what it is, expertise on kind of what you do, and not really containing it within law enforcement too, but branching out. Let's talk about the podcast and kind of what your plans are.
Well, it's in, you know, kind of the stages of being formed, so nothing's real solid on it yet. But my intent is to take, obviously being a police officer, I'm going to have my perspective that's present in the room, but I want to take people that are the best in their field, whatever that may be, and talk to them and learn, because I'm an inquisitive guy, right? Yeah. So I want to just talk to people who have a certain amount of expertise in whatever it is they're pursuing and just learn from them. So whether that be law enforcement or whether it be, you know, I was intrigued at a podcast that I heard once about the guy that wrote, I can't remember if it's Under the Comanche Moon or Comanche Moon, and he talked about his research in Texas history. And
Mike Blakely.
There you go. Fantastic podcast, you know, and I was just intrigued by what this man had to share and all the things that he learned about Texas history, and I kind of want to do something along that vein, you know. Yeah. My side of the table is going to be law enforcement, obviously, but I want to learn from people who are the best in what they do.
Yeah. You know? Well, promise us one thing. Whenever you get it launched, you can come back and we'll co-brand it, push it out, try to get as many followers and listeners from our small little group. It's within the Blue Grit culture, and let's help you succeed, because it's one thing Clinton just talked about. Cops are typically competitive. Speaking on the heels of the TTPOA conference, or excuse me, SWAT competition that just happened this weekend, we're competitive. We like to win and we like to be on top. But I'll say within the podcast world and culture, we have not had one door slam shut in front of us, and so it's a family. and we'll damn sure tell you what we've learned and what mistakes we've made over the course of this, Blue Grit. I don't want to say fiasco, but this Blue Grit mission that Tmpa thankfully has kind of dumped onto the platforms, and so it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to do the show with Clint and guests that come on, and so anything that we can do certainly will help you out.
Do you have a name for it yet?
No. Vance and I are kind of dabbling in starting our own businesses. So I've been working on a name for the business that I'm trying to start, and I'm getting my ideas formulated for the podcast, but not a name yet. And if I could do a shameless plug,
absolutely,
for John Vance specifically, he started a consulting firm, Cinco Peso Consulting Group.
Yep.
Yeah. So he provides expert testimony and things. So I'm kind of working on doing that also.
We may give his number to Texas City. There's some situations going on down there that they probably need some consultation on of how to handle investigations correctly from an administrative point of view.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what all he is considering as far as the consulting side of it. I know that primarily to this point he's been working with attorneys that represent officers in litigation.
Yeah.
So
it would be an interesting investigation. I'll say that.
Yeah. I saw your podcast.
Yeah.
I saw your podcast, and there's a lot going on down there, man. My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, you've hitched up to a good one. John Vance is a freaking good one.
Good.
Well, I tell you what, our paths are pretty similar. Or obviously he's a legendary Texas Ranger
right.
and all, but as far as our interests and he's a neat guy, man. I'm really appreciating the opportunity to get to be friends with him.
Majority of the Rangers that I've ever met have all been pretty down to earth. I haven't met just a couple that have kind of had their chest out, head swole. John Vance has always maintained that John Vance since the day I met him. That's one thing I've always loved about him. Him and Leroy Jenkins. Josh Jenkins, our Ranger in East Texas, two of the most humble, down-to-earth people that I've ever met. But I'll tell you what it comes back to. Both of them worked at a sheriff's office, and both of them had prior law enforcement before they were Rangers.
You bet.
And that's not a shot at the Texas Rangers. That's just fact. Right?
You bet.
So,
I've had the opportunity to work with some Rangers too, and like you said, most of them are just great guys, and ladies that are just their whole mission is to help.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of cool tools, a lot of cool resources that they can lean on.
A Ranger does know. It's the same thing with them. There's no difference. They're a Ranger or a trooper on a Friday, and they're a Ranger on a Saturday, and everybody looks at them like you got some Ranger dust that you just sprinkle on top of it, and they're automatically. They're experts,
Yeah.
So it's funny. So.
Our SOP for homicide is written in a way that regardless of who's on scene, it doesn't matter rank, it doesn't matter. When the homicide detective gets there, the reins are turned over to them. And my very first homicide to be called out on, and I was doing what they, basically shadowing.
Ghost phase or something.
It's similar to that, but the lead detective, his partner. For whatever, I don't even remember why, but he needed that night off. So he's going to the scene. He calls me, says, "Hey, if you want to go, well, I get there, and basically I'm his assist at this point now, but I'm first there." So everybody, hey, and I'm like, well, I've never done this before, kind of thing. Luckily, there was a deputy chief there that I had built a relationship with, and was willing to help me until he got to the scene. But it just, Vance talked about that, how as soon as you get that badge or as soon as you get that title, you're expected to run the show.
That day.
Boy, it's intimidating. It's intimidating.
Yeah. Well, man, we greatly appreciate you coming on. I can't thank you enough. I look very much forward to getting your podcast off the ground.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to y'all coming and talking to me
when
I do get it up.
Well, we like to end each episode with 3 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Did you study for them?
I think I'm aware of them, but I didn't study. So let's see how I do here. Right.
What's your favorite line from a cop movie, your favorite cop car, and your favorite drink of choice whenever you're relaxing?
Okay. Favorite line.
Or it could be a cop movie, whatever.
Well, okay, so if you want to talk about my style of cop movie, it's going to be Tombstone, where the guys are going down to the OK Corral, right?
Yep.
The favorite line, I can't quote it, but when Wyatt Earp finds out that his brother is joined the other brother to be a cop, he's like, oh, he got you too, and now he's like, now I got to do it.
Right.
So that scene is probably my favorite. But I would say, if you want to talk about modern cop movie, maybe Super Troopers.
That's a funny one. That's a funny
Yep.
one. What's your favorite cop car?
Cop car, the Crown Vic was a tank, man. I love that car, but if I want to go fast, you know, the old Whale,
Yep.
yeah, the Shamus, I love those. But I think Crown Vic was probably my favorite that I used the most.
Workhorse.
Yeah, oh, you bet. And drink, I've quit drinking, but when I was drinking, I was a Tito's guy and a little TX bourbon.
There you go.
Every now and then, you know,
There you go.
out of Fort Worth.
I was going to say out of Fort Worth.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So those are my drinks of choice back in the day.
Well, cool. Well, you got anything else?
Nope, makes a promise when you get close or when you get rolling, we'd love to have you back on and premiere, talk about your podcast, the name of it, and make sure we get help you get off the ground. We'd love to be a
Man,
part
I sure
of it.
appreciate that. You guys
Yeah,
been great, and
100%.
thank you. So I mentioned John's company, but I didn't mention my Probative Solutions is mine. Probative
Okay.
Solutions on the consulting.
Nice.
So anyway, we kind of got the same mission that we're trying to do, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that, man.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you,
That's what
guys.
it's about. It's the Blue family. So, well, this about wraps up everything. You guys check out the description. We're gonna have all of his information. Maybe between now and this video drops, we'll have a name for the podcast. If so, we'll damn sure include that in the description. You guys take care. Stay safe. God bless you. And as always, may God bless Texas. We're out.